Alright guys, welcome to Nintendo Switch Tutorials episode 1. In this episode I'm going to show you how to fully exploit your Nintendo Switch by running free custom firmware on it. This will be a full guide on jailbreaking your Switch, including how to help prevent you from getting banned, and also how to make sure that your Switch is jailbreakable. All of that stuff is going to be covered in this tutorial, and this is an episodic series, so episode 1 here is on jailbreaking the Switch, of course, but episode 2 will be about installing games, episode 3 emulators, episode 4 modding your games. We're going to be going through in different episodes to show you how to get the most out of your exploited Switch, so check out the other episodes that will be coming out soon. There'll be a playlist link in the description. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing you're going to want to do, now this is for firmware version 7.0.1 or 7.0.0, and this should work absolutely fine on older firmwares as well, like 6.2.0, 5.1.0, 4, 2, those firmware versions. You can check your firmware version by going to System Settings and then scrolling down to System. And it will say current system version, and as you can see I'm on 7.0.1. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is make sure that our Nintendo Switch is actually jailbreakable. So if you've confirmed that you're on firmware version 7.0.1 or lower, you're good in terms of the firmware version, that's all fine. But we need to make sure the actual Switch itself is jailbreakable, because not all Nintendo Switch consoles are. Some have been patched. So luckily there's this handy guide on GBA Temp that tells you which Nintendo Switches are patched and which ones are safe. Now, the ones in green are safe to jailbreak. They are exploitable. The ones in kind of this yellowy orange are essentially unknown. So they might be jailbreakable, they might not be. You're taking a big gamble if you do attempt to jailbreak those ones, because, you know, you might get lucky, you might not. And of course the ones in red are definitely patched, not jailbreakable. You should not attempt to do a jailbreak on the ones that are patched, because essentially you could end up bricking your system. So, and as for the yellow ones, do it at your own risk essentially, but I wouldn't recommend it. So make sure you're in the green. So your serial number you'll find on the bottom of the Nintendo Switch. There's a little barcode on the left hand side of the USB port, and you'll see that, and just below the barcode is the actual serial number, so you can go ahead and connect that up. Also, it's on the bottom of the box as well. So, you know, the actual box of the Nintendo Switch, you'll find it. There's a little kind of cutout where the same barcode and serial number are located. So, yeah, as you can see with mine is a XAJ7002. And as you can see down the bottom, we've got XAJ7, and we can see serials between XAJ7000 and XAJ0004 are safe to buy. So mine's within that range. Mine's 002, so it's safe and it's jailbreakable. So that's how you can tell if your Nintendo Switch can be jailbroken. And in order to actually exploit the Switch, you'll also need an RCM jig. Now you can get these for a couple of dollars on eBay. They're really cheap. There's just a little 3D printed jig that slides into the right Joy-Con rail that will bridge 2 points on the Switch, which is needed to boot into recovery mode, which is the mode that we use to then load custom firmware from. So you need to go ahead and get one of those. Like I said, a couple dollars on eBay, really cheap, no big deal there. So once you've confirmed that yours is jailbreakable, the next thing we want to do is block all of the connections to Nintendo's servers before we try and boot into custom firmware on our Nintendo Switch. And this is a precautionary measure to help prevent your Nintendo Switch from getting banned. When you jailbreak your Nintendo Switch, there's always a chance that your Nintendo Switch will get banned. It's a risk that you're taking when you jailbreak your Switch, but you can help minimize that risk by doing a few different things. And one of those is setting your DNS server in your Nintendo Switch to 90 DNS, which are these two DNS addresses right here. And what they'll do is they'll block all the connections going out to Nintendo's servers. Because one of the things that can get you banned on the Nintendo Switch is when a third-party application, a non-licensed by Nintendo app, crashes, that'll automatically send an error report. It'll create an error log and it'll send an error report to Nintendo with that crash log. And if Nintendo receives that crash log, they have the information of what console it came from, and they'll see that it came from an application that's unlicensed, so they'll know that your Switch is jailbroken, and then that's how they'll ban you. So by blocking the connections to Nintendo servers, those error logs cannot get out and be sent to Nintendo, therefore you won't get banned. So that is the premise. Although there's still a chance you could still get banned, but this definitely helps minimize the risk. So what we're going to do is we're going to enter those two IP addresses into your DNS settings on the switch. So we go onto the switch, we go onto the internet settings, we select our wireless network, we change settings, go down to DNS settings. You can see mine are already set. By default, yours will be set to automatic. You want to change that to manual and then enter these two IP addresses as your primary and secondary DNS. Once you've done that, you can click save. And now all the connections to Nintendo servers are being blocked, but you still have internet access, so any homebrew applications that you run, any third-party applications that you run that have their own connection to their own servers will still work, just not any connections to Nintendo's servers. So to test it, you can just go ahead and try and do a game update for one of your games, and you'll see you'll get an error code showing that the connection to Nintendo servers is being blocked by that 90 DNS server. So now we're pretty much ready to jailbreak the system. So what we're going to do now is unplug our SD card from our Nintendo Switch and connect it up to our computer. Okay, so before we start, we need to download a few things from the interwebs. We need Tegra RCM GUI, just download the latest version from their GitHub page. All of this stuff will be linked in the description, of course. So just download the portable version. Then we're going to want Atmosphere and just grab the latest release of Atmosphere from their GitHub page. You want the fuseprimary.bin and the .zip file. Then we're also going to grab Cosmos, and normally you would either use Atmosphere or Cosmos, not both. Cosmos is like one package that has Atmosphere, a bunch of homebrew applications, useful homebrew apps that all come pre-installed with it. So, you know, normally you would just use this on its own, but we're going to use Atmosphere as well because this version of Cosmos doesn't actually come with the latest version of Atmosphere yet. So yeah, it comes with the 0.8.5 instead of 0.8.6. So what we're going to do is we're going to just kind of do a kind of combination of both of them. So we're going to go ahead and download cosmos.zip. So download those. As you can see, I've got all four downloaded. Now I also have these patches.zip. These are the SIG patches that you need, which will be linked in the description as well. Those patches will be useful for installing games. You need them for installing games in episode 2. So we might as well install them here as we're initially getting everything set up. So now you want to go ahead and open up your SD card on your computer. You'll probably have this Nintendo folder in there if you've used your SD card on the Switch before. We're not going to mess with anything in that folder. We're just going to add all of our files in here to the SD card. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up cosmos.zip. Now I'm just using WinRAR to open the zip files, but you can open them just within Windows itself, or you can download something like WinRAR or 7-zip to extract the files. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab all of these files apart from the haketa.bin, and we're just going to copy them all into the root of your SD card. Okay, so that's them all copied over. So next we're going to grab that haketa.bin file and we're going to copy that to our desktop. And then that's everything we need to install in Cosmos. So next we're going to open the Atmosphere zip file. And with this one, we're going to go into the sept folder, go into the sept folder on your SD card and copy this one extra file that's in here, the payload.bin. We're going to copy that into the sept folder. And there we go. So you also want to grab the Atmosphere folder in the zip file and replace the one that's already on the SD card. Just replace all the files in destination. So that's all we need from the Atmosphere zip file. So then we'll install the SIG patches. So we'll open the patches.zip file and we'll go into Atmosphere and then go into the Atmosphere folder on your SD card. Grab exefs patches and copy that whole folder into the Atmosphere folder. And then go into the kip patches folder on the SD card and then go into the kip patches folder in the zip file and copy this fs patches folder into the kit patches on the SD card. So there we go, that's the SIG patches installed as well. So now everything is set up on the SD card and ready to go, and we can go ahead and close out of this and plug your SD card back into your Switch, but keep the Switch turned off for now. So now we need to inject the payload. To do that we need Tegra RCM GUI, so I'm just going to extract it to the desktop here from the zip file. We're going to open it up. So when you first open this, you'll probably be prompted to install the driver. If so, then just say yes. If not, go to settings and install driver anyway, and just say yes and next, finish. And then go back to the payload tab. We can delete these favorites because these are kind of older payloads that are slightly outdated. And then we'll open up the Heketa payload from here. So we'll click the browse button, locate the .bin file on your desktop and open it. Then you can add it to favorites. And then we are ready to inject it. So we're all set now to exploit the switch. Okay, so here we go. We've got our switch up here. So what we're going to do is remove the right Joy-Con. We're going to grab our RCM jig. The one I said you can just grab on eBay for a couple of dollars. So we're going to slide that into the right Joy-Con rail all the way down to the bottom. So it's making contact with the contact pins. Then we are going to simply grab a USB-C to USB cable. So it'll be USB-C to USB 3. You know, your phone charger will probably do if it's USB-C. So you'll plug one end, of course, into your computer and then the other end here into your switch. But when we do that, we're going to hold down the volume up button and keep it held down. So by holding down the volume up button and then plugging in our USB-C cable and keeping that volume up button held down, you'll see it says RCM OK. Now nothing will appear on the screen. It'll look like it's still switched off. But as you'll see on the actual computer here, you can see that it says RCM OK in green, which means we're ready to inject the payload. So we just click inject payload. And now you'll see that we get a menu popping up here on screen. So I can unplug the USB-C cable now. Okay, so what you're going to want to do with this menu is we need to dump a few things that will be useful later on for other applications and things that require certain keys and information from your console that you can dump using this payload. So you use the volume up and down buttons to scroll up and down. You use the power button to select. So we're going to go down to console info and select that. So then we're going to go down to print fuse info and press the power button on that. And then it will say press power button to dump them to SD card. So press the power button and you'll see it says done right there. Then you can press the power button again and that will go back. Then we go down to print TSEC keys. Press power button on that. Press power button again to dump them to the SD card. It will say done again. Press the power button again. That will back out. Then we can go up to back. Select back. And now we are pretty much good. We just need to do one more thing, which is go to the launch options, go down to payloads, and you'll have lockpick RCM in here if you installed it via if you installed Cosmos, as I just showed, you'll have lockpick RCM because it comes with it. So we're going to run this .bin file, and this is going to dump all of our keys to a file on our SD card. So then it will say press power or volume up. So just press power or volume up. You'll get this little sept by atmosphere, and then it starts dumping your keys. And there you go, that's it done. Doesn't take long. Then you can either do volume up to boot to RCM, volume down to reboot normally, or power off. So I would say do volume up to reboot back into RCM mode, which again will just be a black screen. It'll look like it's switched off. I guess we'll plug back in our USB cable. So now what I'm going to do on the computer is I'm going to change this payload. Now you can actually boot custom firmware from the Heketa payload, but we're going to use the Fuse primary payload that Atmosphere comes with because there's a problem with Heketa right now where if you boot custom firmware using Heketa, you have issues installing games where it corrupts and it just won't install games properly, which is going to be in episode 2. So we're going to want to be able to install our games properly. So we're going to use the Fuse primary payload to boot our custom firmware instead of the Heketa payload. So we're going to browse for it. We're going to select fuse primary.bin. We can add it to favorites as well. And then I'm going to inject it. So here we go. Let's inject the payload. You'll see it says welcome. There's a little welcome message. And then you should get sept by atmosphere. And then again, it'll take a few seconds and then we'll get the atmosphere boot screen. And this is us now booting into custom firmware. So at this point, you can remove your jig and put your Joy-Con back in. And we're now booting into custom firmware. There we go, we're booting up. Okay, so you may be wondering, how am I supposed to jailbreak the system if I'm somebody who travels and I don't have a computer on hand right next to the switch to inject the payload? Well, that is where one of these comes in. So you can grab these, they're they can be quite expensive, but there's different versions. You know, there's lots of these kind of third-party dongles that inject the payload for you. So these do the function of the computer, the RCM GUI, but you can take this with you. So this will inject the payload for you. So this is probably the best third-party one I've seen, the RCM loader. It allows you to inject multiple different payloads. By holding down the little plus button, it will switch between the different payloads that are available. And you can program this, you can add your own payloads to it. So all you have to do is add the Fuse primary payload onto it, and then you can inject that when you're out and about, and you don't have to have a computer next to you to boot into RCM mode and inject the payload. And this one in particular comes with its own jig, which slots inside so that you don't lose it. So you can have both the jig and the dongle together when you're traveling, so you can easily go ahead and jailbreak the system whenever you want. So it comes with a little mini USB cable to charge it, and you can use this to program it as well, and it's really easy to program. Other ones might be slightly different, but generally this is probably the best one I would recommend going for. So we hook this up to the computer. So when you connect it up to your computer, it shows up as a USB drive, and it shows all the different payloads that it's got. So user 1, 2, and 3 are for your own custom payloads. So in user 1, I would recommend putting the Fuse primary payload in there. And I believe you have to name it payload.bin. So I'm going to rename it to payload.bin. And then that's it. And then if we look on their website, it says the LED color. So you hold down the plus button, and the LED will go blue for atmosphere, green for RENX, red for SXOS, and yellow for user 1. So user 1 is the one we want because that's the Fuse primary payload. So if we switch back now, I unplug this. So if I hold down the plus button, there you go, it goes green, that means it's on RENX. Hold it down again. Red, that's SXOS, hold it down again. Yellow, that's user 1, that's our Fuse primary. So now all you got to do is plug it in. I've already got the other jig connected. So you just hold down the volume up button, press the power button in once while keeping the volume up button held down, and you'll see the LED will come on. It'll go yellow, showing that it's injecting the user 1 payload. And there we go. That's it. It starts booting atmosphere. So that is how you can essentially jailbreak from anywhere. You don't have to have a computer next to you to jailbreak the system. Okay, so here we are booted back up. This time we're on custom firmware. If you go to system settings and you scroll down to the bottom, you see it says system version, and then it's also got in brackets AMS for atmosphere, and then 0.8.6, which is the current version of atmosphere that I'm running. So that shows that we are definitely running our custom firmware. So now all you have to do is hold down the R button and launch the album, and keep the R button held down, and that will open the homebrew menu instead of the normal album. And this is where you run all of your homebrew applications, which are third-party applications made by independent developers, not licensed by Nintendo. So yeah, you can access them right here. And these are a bunch of pre-installed homebrew apps that come with Cosmos. So the main one though that you really want is this one, the Homebrew App Store. This is essentially like the eShop, except it's for homebrew again. It's a homebrew app store, so it allows you to download homebrew applications. So yeah, this has its own server that's not related to Nintendo. So the connection to the Homebrew App Store servers are not being blocked, so you can still access the Homebrew App Store, download stuff. Okay, so here's the Homebrew App Store once it loads up. So you've got all of these homebrew applications that are available right here for you guys to try out. There's so many, it's ridiculous. I'm not going to cover them all here. NX Shell, I'm definitely going to download this. This is just a file manager which allows you to browse the contents of your SD card and copy and paste files and move files about without having to hook the SD card back up to the computer every time you want to move a file or something like that. So it's pretty useful. Okay, so once it's done downloading, it then installs it with a second loading bars installing, and then it's installed. So yeah, as simple as that. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this video. Now, if you're planning on going back online on your Nintendo Switch and you want to reconnect to Nintendo servers, so that you can play online, for example, then I recommend doing one of two things, first of all, to help minimize the chance of being banned in that scenario. One, if we head on to NX Shell here, just to view my SD card. So whenever a homebrew application crashes, or you get any kind of crash log on your system, then Atmosphere is quite handy because it creates another folder in this Atmosphere folder. Something called, I think it's called Crash Dumps, a Crash Dumps folder or Crash Logs folder, something like that. And it stores all of the crash logs in that folder on your SD card. So before you go back online, delete that folder and that will remove all of the crash logs that the Switch is trying to send to Nintendo. So then there won't be any crash logs for it to send to Nintendo. So then you can just boot back into normal firmware by just turning the Switch on normally and then removing the 90 DNS settings from your internet settings to connect back to Nintendo's servers. And then the Switch won't have any crash logs to send to Nintendo, and therefore, you shouldn't get banned. But again, it's still risky, so bear that in mind. There's no guarantee that that'll, fully prevent you from getting banned, but it's another precaution you can take if you are planning on going back online again with the Nintendo Switch on Nintendo's servers. Okay, so that's basically the end of the video, guys. That is how you fully exploit the Nintendo Switch using free custom firmware. So bear in mind that episode 2 will be coming out soon. If it's already out by the time you're watching this video, then there'll be a link at the end of the video. And the playlist for all of the episodes will be in the video description, so you can find any future episodes right there. So the second episode is going to be about how to install games, so NSP file games, XEI file games, and how to dump your game cartridges to an XEI file on your SD card and install it so you can run the game from the SD card without having the game cartridge inserted. So that's all going to be covered in episode 2, and then we're going to be covering some more exciting stuff in the future episodes. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.